She gave her son access, for emergencies only. Then came the luxury vacation, the missing funds, and the deed, with her name gone. But Clara Whitaker didn't vanish. She documented everything, and when the baby shower invitations went out, she returned, with a sheriff, a lawyer, and one unforgettable line: "This isn't your house, it's your exit." They say retirement is the reward for a life of good decisions. For me, that meant 42 years at Fairgrove Elementary. I started there when Jimmy Carter was still president, with more chalk than curriculum and a heart that beat louder every time a child learned to love books. When I walked out for the last time, the library smelled like old paperbacks and lemon polish, my signature combination. My husband, Walter, passed 10 years before I retired. A heart attack, sudden and merciless. We'd planned to travel, Utah's red rocks, Savannah's historic trails. But instead, I kept the house, clipped coupons, and made casseroles for one. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment to start living again. It just hadn't arrived. But then Bradley called. "Come closer to us, Mom," he said. "You deserve family around you now." His voice had that old warmth, the boy who used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. Savannah chimed in on speaker, chirpy and agreeable, promising the guest suite was already halfway ready. It felt like an invitation back into a chapter I'd only half written. So I sold our Missouri home, modest, comfortable mine, and bought a small cottage in Oak Bend, Oregon, 15 minutes from their newer colonial on Millstone Lane. The cottage had cracked shingles and a crooked mailbox, but the porch swung just right in the morning breeze. It had character. It had peace. Every box I unpacked was placed with care. My ledger in the roll-top desk, my antique reading glasses on a crocheted coaster, photo frames that held yellowing edges of old birthdays and anniversaries. There was nothing grand about it, but it was warm, quiet, mine. My neighbor Lois was the first to knock. A retired florist with laugh lines like riverbeds, she brought blueberry scones and sharp observations. "Your son's the one with the slick car and the perfect lawn?" she asked on day 3. "Looks like he came from a catalog." I laughed. She grinned. We walked most mornings after that. Slow, deliberate, talking about everything from taxes to tulips. At church, I met Donna, widowed, like me. She ran the prayer chain and taught Tuesday Bible study. "God gave you years," she said, pressing a hand over mine. "Make sure you use them before someone else does." I didn't quite understand what she meant then, but I nodded, grateful for her certainty. Brad and Savannah came by often that first month. We had Sunday dinners, watched reruns of Jeopardy, laughed over lemon pie. She was glossy, the kind of woman who always had a ring light and opinion ready. But she was polite, always called me Miss Clara, even after I insisted otherwise. One evening, after I mentioned struggling to log into my retirement account, Brad offered casually, "Want me to help you with that? I can link it to our shared online bank. Makes it easier for emergencies." I hesitated. He caught it. "Only if you want, Mom. It's just, you never know. It's safer." And so I did. I trusted him, my only son, the boy I raised on encyclopedias and after-school sandwiches. I gave him read-only access, just for emergencies, nothing more. I still remember the little glint in his eyes when I handed over the folder. He didn't say much, just nodded. The days passed quietly. I painted birdhouses, donated books to the library, took up knitting, though I never got past scarves. Every receipt was logged in my ledger, every expense calculated. I'd saved enough to never be a burden. That had always been my greatest fear. In the quiet rhythm of that new life, I never once imagined the storm already gathering beyond my vision. It started with a number. I was reconciling my monthly statements, a ritual I'd followed for decades. Ledger in hand, glasses perched low, calculator clicks echoing in the quiet of my kitchen. I knew my figures like I knew my own name. But there it was. A withdrawal I didn't make, then another, not large enough to set off alarm bells at the bank, but significant enough to catch my attention. Vacation package, Global Airways. Luxury spa retreat, S. Whitaker. My stomach tightened. I picked up the phone and called Bradley. He didn't answer, but texted back within minutes. "All good, Mom. We moved a few things around for short-term investments. Easier flow, nothing to worry about." Easier flow. It sounded like something an insurance salesman might say while stealing a signature. It wasn't how my son used to talk, but I gave it space. I gave him the benefit of decades. The next Sunday, Savannah hosted a brunch. I arrived with lemon squares and a cardigan knotted at the waist. The house was loud, too much laughter, too many unfamiliar faces. Her sisters were visiting, all hair extensions and glossy voices. I stayed on the edges, sipping black coffee, avoiding the mimosa table. That's when I heard it. "Oh my God, the Maldives was everything!" one of the women cooed, holding up her phone. "Private pool, overwater bungalow, Brad really outdid himself." Savannah laughed, sharp, indulgent. He said, "You deserve the world, babe." And I was like, "Damn right I do." My hand tightened around the coffee mug. I felt it, that slip in my chest. Not quite anger, not yet. Just something darker pushing through the seams. I excused myself quietly and went home. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened my financial portal and stared at the drained figures. I read and reread the transaction summaries until the numbers blurred. They took my money. Not asked, not warned, just took. The next day, I drove to Brad's office. His receptionist gave me the look usually reserved for misplaced salespeople. "He's on a call," she chirped. "I'll wait." He came out 15 minutes later, surprise flashing across his face. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I didn't waste time. "I found the charges. I know about the trip." He glanced at the receptionist and gestured for me to follow him into his glass-walled office. Once seated, he leaned back like it was just another business meeting. "Okay, listen, we just borrowed a bit, all right? It wasn't malicious. You used my retirement fund. We thought you'd understand," he said with a shrug. "We'll pay it back. We just wanted something nice before the baby comes. No one even told me you were planning a trip, let alone using my money to fund it." "It's not like we drained you," he snapped. "It's still our family's money." There it was, that one word, our. I stood slowly. "You took something that didn't belong to you. That's not borrowing, Brad. That's betrayal." He didn't follow me out, and I didn't turn around. That night, I pulled out the original deed to my cottage, tucked away in the fireproof box under my bed. I'd kept every document since the day I closed on it, but something felt wrong. My name, Clara J. Whitaker, was gone. It had been replaced with Bradley T. Whitaker and Savannah L. Whitaker, trustees. Trustees. Somewhere in the haze of shared logins, paperwork updates, and misplaced trust, my ownership had been replaced with guardianship. They hadn't just used my money. They had quietly removed me from the very house I'd bought. It started with the books, not thrown out, just boxed, sealed neatly in plastic tubs and carried to the garage for decluttering, as Savannah put it. My collection of first editions, the children's series I read aloud as a teacher, the paperbacks Walter and I traded on weekends. Then it was my teacup, the chipped one with violets on the rim, always kept by the kettle. One morning, I reached for it and found a sleek glass mug in its place. "I swapped them out," Savannah said, breezing through the kitchen in her yoga gear. "The old ones were too vintage, not in a cute way." She said it like a joke, but something inside me curled tight and quiet. The house, the one I paid for, the one that was once full of my colors and my patterns, began to change. Soft browns and faded floral prints were replaced with white marble countertops, brushed nickel fixtures, and sharp-edged chrome decor. The scent of my cinnamon potpourri was drowned out by her eucalyptus candles and diffuser oils. I was never consulted, not once. Every day, something else was different. The throw blanket from my armchair disappeared, my embroidered hand towels replaced with monogrammed linens, my garden shears mysteriously misplaced. I started making coffee earlier and earlier, just to have a moment of peace before the house woke up and reclaimed itself. Savannah didn't scream. She didn't insult outright. Instead, she suffocated with a smile. "I thought you'd like the new backsplash," she'd say, gesturing to the kitchen wall. "So modern. It lifts the space. You're always reading about aesthetics, right?" She said things like that often. Just enough sweetness to keep her shielded, just enough bite to wound. I became a ghost who paid bills. Lois noticed first. We were walking the trail near our neighborhood when she reached out, tugged gently on my sleeve. "You used to smile when we walked," she said, voice soft. "What happened, honey?" I blinked, startled by the question. "I suppose I forgot how," I said. She didn't press, just squeezed my hand once and walked beside me in silence the rest of the way. That night, I found my old journal. hardbound, dusty from disuse. I opened it to the last page written almost 7 years prior, an entry about my retirement party. I had used a blue ink pen. My writing then was tidy, hopeful. I started a new entry. Today, Savannah packed my entire bookshelf without asking. She said the shelves were better used for statement pieces. I used to be a statement. Now I'm just a placeholder. Every night after that, I wrote a little more. Sometimes full pages, sometimes a single line. I feel like wallpaper. Something meant to blend and never speak. When did I start apologizing for being visible? This isn't my home. It's just where I sleep now. The journaling didn't solve anything, but it reminded me that I still existed. Somewhere in the margins, somewhere between the chrome and the marble, I was still Clara Whitaker. I just had to figure out how to find her again. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The shift was quiet, like water wearing away stone. Subtle comments, careful phrasing, a coolness in the air that wasn't there before. Savannah stopped calling me Miss Clara. She began calling me clingy. "Oh, you know how she gets," she'd say when I'd ask about dinner plans. "She needs constant structure or she spirals." Brad didn't challenge her. He nodded like a man too tired to get involved, like someone who wanted peace at any cost. But peace shouldn't feel like being erased. One night, I passed the living room on the way to the laundry and heard Savannah's voice, breathy and exaggerated, drifting through the open doorway. "She's sweet, but she's just always here. Like a couch no one wants to sit on, but no one knows how to move. Total burden." A laugh followed. Not cruel, worse, casual, dismissive. My legs trembled on the way back down the hall, but I didn't drop the basket. I folded towels with surgical precision that night, hands clenched until my knuckles ached. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to speak at breakfast. I just sipped my coffee and looked at the spoon, wondering when it had become this heavy. Later, I walked the neighborhood loop with Lois. We didn't speak much, just the sound of our shoes on the sidewalk, the occasional car humming by. She glanced at me near the end. "You seem like you're holding your breath all the time now." I didn't answer. That evening, I visited Donna at the church. She was organizing hymnals when I arrived, wearing her apron and a look that saw straight through me. We sat on the pews in the back row. No choir rehearsing, no organ playing. "I used to think silence kept the peace," I said finally. She gave a small hum. "Politeness is not peace, Clara. It's just a prettier kind of prison." That night, I dreamed of my mother. She was stirring soup at our old stove, steam fogging her glasses. I must have been 9 or 10. I'd raised my voice at the dinner table once, trying to argue a point I no longer remembered. "Quiet women are good women," she'd whispered after everyone had gone to bed. "Loud women don't last." I had carried that with me like gospel. That memory hit me like a stone the next morning as I stood in the doorway of the living room, watching Savannah rearrange throw pillows and mock a news anchor's wardrobe. I realized I hadn't just been trained to be small. I'd come to believe smallness was safety. Until now. That afternoon, I sat with my journal and wrote, "I have never been loud. I have only been obedient, and obedience has cost me everything." The final blow came 2 days later. I received a letter from the bank. I opened it slowly, hands already anticipating the ache. Overdraft notice, retirement account, nearly empty. Significant activity over 90 days, the letter said. I checked the transactions again, but I already knew what I'd find. Luxury charges, designer names, spa treatments, flights, nothing mine, nothing left. The mirror in the guest bathroom was narrow and framed in tarnished gold, one of the few pieces in the house that Savannah hadn't replaced. It leaned slightly to one side, as though even it wasn't sure it belonged here anymore. I stood in front of it one morning, long after the kitchen had gone quiet, and the smell of Savannah's citrus diffuser had faded. "You are still here," I said softly to my reflection. My voice wavered. "You are not gone." The woman looking back at me had gray at her roots, yes, wrinkles forming soft brackets around her mouth. But her eyes still held light. Her shoulders were tired, but not broken. That evening, I opened a box I hadn't touched since moving in. Inside were photo albums, leather-bound, fragile at the spine. Me in bell-bottoms holding Brad at age 3. Walter's arm slung over my shoulder in a Colorado cabin. A Polaroid of my first classroom, shelves crooked but full of books. I laid them out on the bed and just stared. It reminded me of who I had been, who I still was, underneath all the erasure. In the bottom of the box was a small wooden kit, my watercolor set. I hadn't painted in years. The brushes were stiff, the paints cracked, but it was still mine. That weekend, while Brad and Savannah were away at some influencer retreat, I set up a folding table in my cottage's back room. I painted a single blue hydrangea. The shape was off, the shading clumsy, but I signed my initials in the corner with quiet pride. Each day after that, I added something else to my recovery. I started jotting down small details: the Amazon deliveries, the luxury skincare invoices, the out-of-state charge labeled Jet Sky Luxury. I copied statements quietly, methodically. Each page was tucked into a manila envelope under my mattress. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I needed to know the truth, needed proof that I wasn't imagining the bleed. Lois came by with warm scones one afternoon and found me at the table surrounded by highlighters and bank documents. Her brows lifted. "You turning into a detective on me, Clara?" I smiled faintly. "I think I'm remembering how to look." She hesitated, then pulled something from her tote bag. A paperback, worn at the corners. "Found this at the community bookstore. Thought of you." It was titled Elder Law Essentials, Estate Rights and Protections. I looked up, startled. "Just in case," Lois said gently. "No one's saying anything, but knowing is power, honey." I ran my hand across the cover. It felt heavier than it looked. That night, I read until past midnight. By the end, I had dog-eared every page about revocable ownership and trust abuse. And for the first time in months, I slept soundly. It was a simple idea: a pot roast, soft rolls, the peach cobbler recipe from Walter's old recipe card, his handwriting still smudged in the corner. Nothing fancy, just a dinner, just family. I set the table with the good china, the set I'd kept boxed for years after the move. Cloth napkins, candles in the crystal holders. I even put a flower arrangement in the center, blue hydrangeas and baby's breath, arranged just so. I texted Brad and Savannah 3 days ahead, followed up the morning of. Brad replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Savannah didn't respond. I cooked anyway. By 7 o'clock, the roast was resting under foil. The house smelled of rosemary and warm sugar, and my cardigan was buttoned up all the way to my neck. By 7:40, I sat at the table alone. No message, no knock, just silence. I reached for my phone, already preparing to call when I heard music. Loud, bass-heavy music. Through the front window, I saw cars pulling up. Bright headlights, laughter, heels clicking against pavement. It wasn't dinner they were late for. It was something else entirely. I opened the door and was met with a flood of perfume and chatter. Savannah breezed past me in a satin dress, 2 women in matching designer blazers behind her. "Sorry, Clara, forgot to mention. Hosting a tasting for the wine brand I'm partnering with. Shouldn't last long." She kissed the air beside my cheek and disappeared into the living room. I stood frozen in the entryway as a man with a camera rig directed a woman to pose by the newly installed fireplace. "More light in the foyer," someone called out. "Get a few shots with the backsplash. Make sure you highlight that." It hit me then. This house, my house, was no longer a home. It had become a set piece, a stage for someone else's story. I walked into the kitchen and saw my pot roast untouched, now cold. The rolls had deflated, the cobbler darkened at the edges. I stood there a long time, listening to laughter that didn't include me. I left the dishes where they were and stepped out the back door. Lois found me the next morning, still in my robe, sitting on the porch swing with the crusted remains of cobbler beside me. She didn't speak at first, just handed me a warm cup of coffee and sat down. "They hijacked the house," I whispered. "The dinner was for them." She stared ahead at the hydrangeas blooming by my steps. "Don't let them write you out of your own story, Clara," she said, voice soft but unwavering. "You've been a footnote long enough." I didn't reply, but something deep inside me moved. Later that evening, I sat in my room scrolling through my phone, unable to sleep. I opened Savannah's blog. Curiosity or punishment, I wasn't sure. She'd recently revamped it into a lifestyle platform. Minimalist wealth, designing the life you deserve. The latest post stopped me cold. Title: Redesigning Legacy, Modernizing Our Inherited Home. Excerpt: "It's been such a blessing to redesign the home my husband inherited, a chance to honor family while also making it our own. Every wall tells a story. Every corner has become ours. Ours. The bile rose in my throat. There was no mention of me. No trace of who made the down payment. No footnote for the woman whose name was erased from the deed. It wasn't just erasure, it was replacement. I closed the laptop gently. No tears, just a strange, clean kind of clarity. I drove back to the credit union on a Thursday morning, wearing the same gray coat I'd worn the day I retired. It still smelled faintly of lavender. The teller, young, cheerful, oblivious, greeted me by name. "What can we help you with today, Miss Whitaker?" "I'd like to request my full transaction history from the last 12 months, I said. "Every account, even the closed ones." Her smile faltered a little. "Of course. Give me just a moment." 10 minutes later, I sat in a vinyl chair, a manila folder in my lap. Page after page of transactions, transfers, and account summaries. Most of it I recognized, but some I didn't. One line item stood out. New account opened. Brad T. Whitaker, joint holder, C.J. Whitaker, SSN, ending in 5283. I felt it first in my fingertips. Numbness, like my body was catching up to what my heart had known for weeks. I left the bank with a copy of everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my table with a binder, one I'd once used for PTA meeting notes and classroom rosters. I labeled it CW-Final in sharp black ink. Inside, I filed every bank statement, transaction receipt, and copy of the fraudulent account setup. Color-coded tabs, notes scribbled in margins. I'd kept paper trails my whole life, but this was the first one I'd ever written like a weapon. Sunday after service, I found Carson Vance in the church courtyard, folding chairs into a truck bed. He'd been a practicing attorney for 40 years before retiring to Oak Bend. Widower, quiet, kind. "Carson," I said, "do you still give legal advice or just carry chairs?" He looked up, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Depends on who's asking." We sat at a picnic table with my binder open between us. He read everything, silently, slowly, underlining with a pen he pulled from his jacket. When he finished, he leaned back. "You've been robbed, Clara. Quiet theft is still theft, sometimes worse. It hides under love." I nodded, throat dry. "Do you want to go to court?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "But I want my house back, and I want them out of it." Carson smiled faintly. "Then we'll do it right." He handed me a checklist: trust retraction, title reassignment, probate immunity, legal transfer rights under elder abuse laws. I didn't understand half of it, but I trusted the hand that drew it up. I tucked the binder under my arm and walked out of the church with my spine straighter than it had been in months. Let Savannah host her wine tastings. Let Brad sign checks with my name, for now. They didn't know the quiet woman in the corner was collecting every receipt. And the next time I knocked, I wouldn't be asking permission. There's something sacred about moving in silence, about gathering power with no announcement. Carson filed the title retraction on a Wednesday. Savannah's name had never been valid, signed without authority, registered under false trust conditions. It was textbook estate fraud, wrapped in familial entitlement. "Congratulations," he said, as I initialed the last page. "You're legally the sole owner again." I didn't feel triumph. I felt gravity. That afternoon, I sat in the living room alone and stared at the walls. Every surface whispered someone else's taste. Art I never picked, furniture I didn't like, color palettes that made my skin feel cold. I began the inventory that night. Every item I had brought into the house, my antiques, my quilts, my keepsakes, I cataloged. The vintage sewing machine, the cedar chest from my mother, Walter's war medals. I listed everything, wrapped them in bubble wrap, and labeled them with dates. Then I sold what I could. The china cabinet to a young couple in Eugene, the needlepoint chair to a retired woman who drove in from Salem. I watched each piece disappear into someone else's story. I deposited every dollar into escrow, my final safety net. When I walked into the credit union to authorize the housing account, the clerk said, "Starting fresh?" "Yes," I replied, "burning down the old first." I scheduled a 30-day notice. Legal, binding. Carson would serve the papers quietly. No drama, just a deadline. I began packing while no one was home. Each evening, I slipped into the garage and opened another box, wrapped another photograph, emptied another drawer. I didn't cry. Instead, I listened to the silence as it slowly returned to the bones of the house, the echo of rooms once warm now cooled with resignation. I left the guest bathroom untouched. Savannah's diffuser still hummed, her hand towels still pristine, but everything that was mine had already begun to disappear. One night, while boxing up old letters in the guest room, I heard laughter downstairs. Not uncommon, but this time, I heard my name. "She won't care," Savannah said, voice light. "We'll host it here. I mean, it's basically ours now." Another voice, shrill and excited, piped in. "OMG, yes, neutral balloons, that rustic cake, and the aesthetic wall setup." Savannah laughed. "Clara's not invited. She doesn't really get it. We'll call it a private event." I stepped out into the hall. The door at the bottom of the stairs was ajar. I could see the glow of her laptop screen. She was planning a baby shower. In my house, without telling me. I closed the door softly, walked back to my room, and circled the move-out date on my calendar with a red pen. The match had been struck. They just hadn't seen the smoke yet. Rain lashed the windshield as we turned onto Millstone Lane. The clouds were thick, low enough to touch the treetops. Thunder rolled just far enough away to feel theatrical, almost rehearsed. "Last chance to back out," Carson said from the passenger seat, holding the envelope with the court's signature seal. I shook my head. "Let's begin." The real estate agent, Melissa, followed in her sedan, raincoat over her blazer, clipboard tucked under one arm. Sheriff Clay arrived in a separate car, nodding once as he stepped into position behind us. It wasn't a raid, it was a reckoning. Inside the house, music played, something instrumental and overpriced. Laughter carried out through the front windows, warm and oblivious. Savannah's baby shower was in full swing. Pink and white balloons clung to the archway. Instagram props lined the walls. A camera tripod stood next to the drink station. I opened the door and stepped inside without knocking. Voices faltered mid-sentence. Faces turned. Savannah stood near the fireplace in a cream satin dress, her hand resting just below her stomach. "Clara?" She blinked, unsure whether to perform politeness or recoil. "We didn't expect—" "You wouldn't have," I interrupted. "You didn't invite me." Brad appeared from the hallway, mouth already forming apologies he hadn't yet committed to. "Mom, can we talk?" "No," I said flatly. "This isn't a discussion." Melissa stepped forward, placing the signed ownership transfer documents on the foyer table. "We're here to begin the formal walkthrough." Sheriff Clay followed, unfolding a court notice. Per Oregon Statute 124.110 and 105.110, he said, "Clara Whitaker is the sole legal owner of this property. All non-owner residents are hereby given 30 days' notice to vacate." Savannah's mouth fell open. "This has to be a mistake," she snapped. "You can't just— This is our house." I turned to her steady. "This house is no longer yours to show. It was never yours to take." Brad's voice cracked. "Mom, come on, this is overreacting." "Is it?" I asked. "Did you ask me when you drained my retirement, when you forged my name, when you wrote me out of a life I paid for?" He looked away. Savannah shook her head in disbelief, muttering about influence, legal advisors, PR fallout, but I wasn't there for argument. I walked past the decorative wall where Savannah had hung gold letters spelling baby bloom. I reached the front door, stepped outside, and into the rain. The mailbox stood crooked, still bearing the nameplate I had installed that first week after moving in. Clara J. Whitaker. I unscrewed it slowly, wiped the plaque with my sleeve, and slid it into my coat pocket. Thunder cracked above. Behind me, the sheriff's voice was calm but firm, escorting guests toward the exit. I stood there on the lawn, coat unbuttoned, soaked through but unshivering. This wasn't just about a house. It was about identity, about agency, about no longer choosing silence in the name of family. The rain blurred everything around me, but I saw clearly for the first time in years. I hadn't just crossed a threshold, I'd closed it behind me. The knock came 2 days after the baby shower fallout. 3 sharp raps, familiar, rehearsed. I opened the door to find Brad standing on the front porch of my temporary cottage, drenched in guilt and Oregon rain. His hands were empty. His face wasn't angry. It was something worse. Confused, bruised by his own choices. "You didn't have to do that," he said. No hello, no apology. I stepped aside but didn't invite him in. "You were supposed to help us," he said, voice cracking. I did, I said quietly. For years. I helped until you took help for ownership. You're my mother. And you were my son, I said, voice sharper now. But you handed me over like property. You and Savannah didn't just take my money. You took my name. You turned me into a fixture. He looked at the floor, rain pooling around his shoes. I didn't think it would go that far, he whispered. No one ever does, I replied, until someone finally stops them. The silence stretched between us like rope, taut and fraying. He didn't offer an apology. He just left. That night, I unpacked the last of my boxes in Unit 3C at Rosewood Pines, an independent living community for seniors tucked between fir trees and old bookstores. It smelled like lemon oil and fresh muffins. My neighbor June knocked an hour later with hot cider and sharp wit. Retired nurse, she said, settling onto my couch like she'd always belonged. Outlived 2 husbands. Learned to swear in Italian during the second one. I laughed for the first time in weeks. We started walking every morning, just a quarter-mile loop, but she pointed out every robin's nest and hydrangea patch like it was treasure. I began cooking again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. French toast on Saturdays, lentil stew on Thursdays. I read whole novels without interruption, took my tea wherever I pleased. No one moved my cup, no one erased my space. One afternoon on our walk, June paused under a cherry blossom and turned to me. You're lighter, she said. It's the walking, I joked. No, she said, serious now. It's in your eyes. You didn't leave your house, Clara. You reclaimed yourself. I nodded, throat tight. That night, a package arrived. No return address, just a small velvet box inside a brown envelope. Inside was a wedding ring, Savannah's. Rose gold, custom-cut diamond, inscription on the inside, forever us. Beneath it, a note in her loopy handwriting. He finally saw what I was. Do with this what you need to. S. I stared at the ring for a long time. Then I closed the box, set it on a shelf, and walked out onto my balcony. The sun was setting, streaking the sky in firelight. The storm was over, but I had learned how to weather anything now. Peace didn't come like thunder. It came like tea steeping, slow, warming, full of flavor I'd forgotten existed. Every Thursday morning, I walked to the downtown library and sat beneath a maple tree in the courtyard, reading to a circle of squirmy children. Some climbed into my lap. Some whispered the endings before I got there. All of them listened. One morning, a boy named Caleb turned to me mid-sentence and said, "You sound like books feel." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the paperback. Later that day, I stopped by June's apartment with leftover chicken pot pie and told her what he'd said. "You're finding your rhythm again," she said, nodding. "Sounds like your voice never left. It just got muffled." That night, I opened my laptop and started typing. I created a blog. Nothing flashy, just a white background, a cursive header that read, "The Quiet Exit." No photos, no names. Just one post, a memoir in miniature. I told my story the way I lived it. Plainly, honestly, from the inside out. I wrote about the smallness of betrayal, the sting of silence, the strange grief of being alive but invisible in your own home. By morning, the blog had 3 comments. By the end of the week, it had over 400. Women wrote from Iowa, Arizona, Maine, some from retirement communities, others from 2-story houses where they said they felt like ghosts. "You showed me I could say no, even at 60, one comment read. "I thought I was alone. I thought I had to endure," wrote another. I didn't reply to most. I didn't need to. The point wasn't validation. It was resonance. The words had left my mouth and found their way into the hearts of others, like seeds landing on ready soil. Every Saturday morning, I posted something new. A memory, a metaphor, a letter I never sent. The posts weren't polished, they were real. One day, Lois sent me a message. "You never burned the house down, Clara, but you lit a candle for every woman still locked inside one." I stared at the screen for a long time before writing back. That's all I ever wanted, a key for someone else. The cottage was small, but it breathed. Mismatched chairs circled the dining table, some borrowed, some rescued from thrift stores, each one with its own history. The table itself wobbled slightly, but I'd tucked a coaster beneath one leg. Problem solved. The scent of rosemary chicken filled the room, mingling with peach cobbler and vanilla candles. Lois brought a cranberry salad in a glass bowl older than I was. Carson arrived with a bottle of red wine and a folded napkin of cornbread. June brought her booming laugh and a story about nearly joining a biker gang in the 70s. Vintage jazz hummed softly from the corner speaker. Chet Baker on trumpet, soft and haunting. The lights overhead were strung like stars, warm, uneven, comforting. We ate slowly. We refilled each other's glasses. We passed dishes without asking. It wasn't about food. It was about being seen, about taking up space and not shrinking to accommodate anyone else's comfort. After dessert, I led them into the front room, where I had hung my newest painting. The canvas was simple, a wooden door cracked half open, light pouring through into shadow. "I painted it last week," I said. "What's through the door?" June asked, sipping her tea. I smiled. "Whatever you were told you couldn't have." We sat for a long time, the conversation meandering. Childhoods, mistakes, triumphs. No one dominated the room, everyone belonged. Later, as the evening waned and coats were gathered, I stepped out onto the porch. The wind had picked up, tossing leaves across the yard. I looked up and felt the breeze catch my hair, lifting it from my shoulders. Someone, I think it was Carson, snapped a picture. Caught mid-laugh, unposed, alive. Back inside, I turned off the lights one by one until only the soft glow from the painting remained. And in that moment, my voice echoed in my own mind, not loud but absolute. I didn't just buy back a deed, I bought back my place in the world. What if your silence is someone else's blueprint for survival? If Clara's story stirred something inside you, an echo, a memory, a boundary you've questioned, don't let it dissolve. Share it with the woman who's still shrinking in her own home. Talk about it, write about it, build something from it. Because the quiet ones, they're rewriting everything now.